Welcome to Pod Me If You Can, where we find obscure films with your favourite stars and we discuss them. Lloyd, what's today's film?
The movie I chose for this week's review is Comic Book the Movie, which is directed and stars Mark Hamill.
Pardon me if you can. Movie reviews.
A major Hollywood studio is about to make a feature film on the beloved hero Commander Courage. Hoping to gain some publicity from the biggest comic convention in the world, the San Diego Comic-Con, the studio sent a small team to make a promotional documentary. The studio employed Donald Swan, played by Mark Hamill, an enthusiastic fan of comic books who passionately leads the charge of interviews and research. But as he gets closer with the accompanying studio execs, he discovers that they are more interested in profit. He must find a way to ensure that they respect and try to maintain the spirit of the original comic books that fans such as himself have loved for generations. This is a direct-to-DVD mockumentary, and it is loaded with special features. It's also loaded with lots and lots of cameos of talented voice actors and, of course, stars. These include Kevin Smith, Hugh Hefner, Stan Lee, Lloyd Kaufman, Bruce Campbell, comic book legends Peter David, Paul Dini, Simpsons creator Matt Groening, and Baywatch's Donna D'Errico. Mark Hamill has, of course, since Star Wars, has become one of the great voice actors of our time. His most notable role is, of course, the Joker from Batman the Animated TV series, one of the greatest kids' cartoons ever made. He, of course, reprised the role again in video games with the legendary Batman Arkham City and Arkham Asylum. I think that's the sequel. He pulls in all his a lot of favors, all his friends, voice actors, and everyone, and fans from stars from Star Wars, in this movie. They're only in a few scenes, and they play lots of cameos, and a lot of the voice actors play significant roles. Some of the Star Wars stars include the guy who played physically Darth Vader. I think his name is David Prowse, if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
I believe you are. Yep.
Peter Mayhew, who played Chewbacca, and Jeremy Bulloch, who played Boba Fett. They're like in small cameos. So if you're a big fan of Star Wars, obviously there's a lot of in-jokes in them. A lot of time is spent on the mythology of Commander Courage, and I think this is where the film gets really bogged down. There's a lot of time, and there's some great artwork to the actual comics of Commander Courage, and what Commander Courage is really is pretty much Superman, and they approach it literally like an historical documentary, going from its creation in the 40s all the way, and its evolution from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and what it meant to the culture at the time. Mark Hamill's character, Donald Swan, speaks with so much enthusiasm of Commander Courage, his passion and love, and what it meant to the fans, and we see the fervish cult following of the comic book nerds for them, and I think that should have been it. There was so much time, it's like watching an historical documentary on this fictitious hero. It was as if Mark Hamill wanted to ensure the validity of the mythology of Commander Courage in this universe, and I think too much time was spent on that. Commander Courage pretty much represents all superheroes, and it's clear from right from the beginning that the film wants to highlight the cruel machinations of the corporate, how all they want is to squeeze profit out of this icon, and Mark Hamill's character fights tooth and nail to get his voice at least heard, so the executives and people get some glimmer of understanding of what these heroes means to the fans. Unfortunately, the movie just seems to drag on and on. What I think is at fault here is the improvisation style. I think it's a hit or miss technique, and unfortunately 99% of the jokes in this movie just fails, just doesn't work. The moment we get to the San Diego Comic-Con, we are left with all these random people doing overlong bits, and getting to the punchline just seems to drag on and on. Now, it's just weird because what I'm assuming, they had days of footage at the San Diego Comic-Con that none of these great talented voice actors could get a good bit going. I personally blame the improvisation style. I don't think the voice actors were suited to this kind of style. Personally, I think this would have been much better for a stand-up comedian to do, but it's clear that they just weren't comfortable with this sort of technique. There was also a lot of in-jokes between Mark Hamill and a lot of his friends and the voice actors, actors and a lot of stars that I don't think an average viewer would get. This was shot on digital, so it looks very Jackass-like. The improvisation style and the digital look has a really interesting energy to it, and I think the biggest strength of Comic Book the Movie is how it makes all the crazy fans of the Comic-Con convention, despite all their crazy costumes and everything, it makes them seem normal and really kind and a really great environment, and everyone who isn't a comic book fan just seems like the corporate people or the business people just seems really strange and cruel. So I thought that was a big strength of the movie. I don't think this is a good movie. I think the improvisation, over long bits that just wasn't funny. So much time spent on Commander Courage and its history. I think Mark Hamill was really good in this, and there were lots of good cameos. My personal favorite being Kevin Smith, where he talks a lot about in jokes I've heard from Kevin Smith lectures that only people who've seen those lectures would get, and. I really struggled to get through this, to be honest with you. It took me about 3 sittings. And I like Mark Hamill. I think he did a pretty, his character was great in this, but it just wasn't a good film overall. The IMDb message board, when I was looking up this film, is packed full of reviews of people who were actually in this movie. So they were at the Comic-Con convention. They were talking about how great it was to meet Mark Hamill and all these Star Wars fans. So I guess you could say it would be so awesome to say you've been in a Mark Hamill movie. The best thing about this DVD is that it is loaded with special features. These include lots of talk about voice actors, the great voice actors of the 90s and things like that. There's a long interview with Hugh Hefner and his involvement with comic books, because obviously Hugh Hefner's in publication. Lots of panels from Star Wars people that were actually from the Comic-Con. So if you're going to see this movie, I suggest get the DVD, and if you're interested in voice actors and all that, I strongly advise getting this DVD, because it is loaded with special features.
I'm just curious about the look of Mark Hamill's superhero. Does he look like Superman as well?
Kind of. He's got a cape. It's hard to say because the comic books doesn't look that bad. It's just a guy with a mask and a cape, pretty much. So picture one of the heroes from that movie, The Watchmen, or one of the cape guys in that movie.
Okay.
Similar looking like that. But Mark Hamill has this costume made up, and I think for the movie, for the comic convention, he gets a really cool designer to make it. And I personally think it looks terrible, but I think that's part of the humor of the film as well.
Okay, one to check out. I think you can find more from us at our YouTube channel, or at www.podmeyifyoucan.com.
Thanks for watching. If you like what you see, please hit the subscribe button. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Check out our podcast at www.podmeyifyoucan.com.